everyone, and welcome to the Pathfinder Lair. My name is Drew, and I've been a game master for over 10 years. On this channel, I help new players understand the rules of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. Today in the Lair, I will be continuing my Ancestry album series with the Human Ancestry, which includes the Half-Elf and the Half-Orc. These heritages can be applied to any ancestry, but they are covered in the human section of the book, so I will cover them in this video. Let's get started with the basics. The first thing that really stands out about the human ancestry is that they get 2 free ability boosts and no ability flaw. Note that your second ability boost cannot be the same as your first, i.e. if you choose strength for your first boost, your second boost cannot be strength. I'm pretty sure humans are the only ancestry that gets this specific setup for ability boosts. Next, as a human, you start off with 8 ancestry hit points. Also, you have a speed of 25 feet, like most ancestries do. Your traits are human and humanoid. There has been an errata in the rules on the language section of this ancestry. The core rulebook says that you get languages equal to your intelligence modifier, but that has been changed to give you one more language in addition to common and your intelligence modifier. Also, humans do not get low light vision or dark vision without a heritage or a feat, just like halflings. I covered halflings in my last video, so check that out in the card. Now that I've covered the bases of humans, it's time to cover the heritages. Let's start with the half-elf heritage. As I said before, this and the half-orc heritage can be applied to any ancestry. They are just covered in this section of the book, so I'm covering them now. Half-elves gain the elf trait and low-light vision, and they can choose from elf, half-elf, and the feats available to their ancestry whenever they get an ancestry feat. I will not cover the elf feats in this video because I do so in my elves video. Check it out in the card. That is pretty much it for the half-elf heritage. The half-orc heritage is almost identical to the half-elf heritage, except instead of choosing from elf, half-elf, and the feats available to their ancestry, they get to choose from orc, half-orc, and the feats available to their ancestry, of course. They get low light vision just like half-elves do. I will not cover the orc feats in this video. I will cover them in a future video. Next we have the skilled human heritage. You become trained in a skill of your choice in addition to the ones you are already trained in from your class and background. When you reach 5th level, you automatically become an expert in your chosen skill. Becoming trained in any skill you want is pretty fantastic. If you're not playing a half-elf or a half-orc, definitely consider this heritage. Fourth, we have the versatile human heritage. This heritage gives you an extra general feat. You must meet the prerequisites of this feat as normal. This heritage can be very good. If you are playing a standard human and don't want an extra skill, this is the heritage for you. Finally, for human heritages, we have the winter-touched human. This heritage is identical to the Arctic elf heritage, which I covered in my elf ancestry video. Again, you can check out that video up in the card. Now let's move on to human ancestry feats. I will cover the feats that all humans can take first, and then I will move on to the half-elf and half-orc feats. For first level, let's get started with Adapted Cantrip. In order to take this feat, you must be a spellcaster of some kind. So, possibly a bard, a cleric, or a druid. Basically, you pick a cantrip that isn't on your spell list. You get that cantrip, but you must replace one of your current cantrips with that cantrip. For example, if you have a spell repertoire or a spell book, you must replace one cantrip you know or have in your spell book with that spell. If you prepare spells without a spell book, then one of your cantrips prepared must always be the spell you chose for this feat. If you swap or retrain this cantrip later, you can choose any cantrip that is a different tradition from your own. This feat is really good. Yes, you have to get rid of one of your cantrips, so it doesn't give you an extra cantrip, but it does allow you to use a cantrip you wouldn't normally be able to cast. Next we have the Cooperative Nature feat. This feat just gives you a +4 circumstance bonus on checks to use the aid reaction to help another player. This feat is situational. It's good if you use the aid action a lot, but otherwise you probably want to take something else. Third is General Training. This feat gives you an extra first level general feat. You must meet the prerequisites of this feat as normal. If you have the versatile human heritage, this feat can give you another general feat. This feat can be really good depending on what general feat you choose for it. Now let's talk about Haughty Obstinacy. If you get a success on a saving throw against a mental effect that tries to directly control your actions, like a Dominate spell for instance, you get a critical success instead. Also, if someone tries to coerce you and gets a regular fail, they get a critical failure instead. The first part of this feat is only good at high levels when you may run into that type of thing more often. The second part of this feat isn't good at all. Most GMs won't have creatures try to coerce you because it takes away player agency. Maybe take this feat at high level, but don't take it at first level for sure. Fifth is the Natural Ambition feat. This feat just gives you an extra first level class feat for your class. You still have to meet the prerequisites, though, as normal. This feat is really good because while every class gets a first level class feat, getting a second one is phenomenal. It's like you're taking your class twice when it comes to feats. Consider this feat if you can't decide between two first level class feats you want. Next we have the Natural Skill feat. This feat just gives you trained proficiency in 2 extra skills. You get to choose those skills, which is fantastic. This is another way high intelligence rogues can be trained in all skills. Also, just having 2 extra skills is great for any class that doesn't have a lot of skills. If you want 2 extra skills, take this feat. Lastly, for the first level human ancestry feats in the core rulebook, we have Unconventional Weaponry. This feat pretty much gives you weapon familiarity from a different ancestry. Want to use a horse chopper? Take this feat and choose Goblin. Want to use an Elven Curve Blade? Choose Elf with this feat. The only difference is that you pick only one weapon, whereas the weapon familiarity feats give you access to all weapons in that group. This feat is good. There are a lot of really good racial weapons out there, and you might not be proficient with them. If you're not and you want to use them, take this feat. There are no first level human ancestry feats in the APG, so let's move on to the Lost Omens character guide. As I said in my Halfling video, a lot of these feats require certain ethnicities. This is going to be true of most of the feats covered in the Lost Omens character guide. Your GM can give you access to these feats if he wants to. First up in the Lost Omens character guide, we have the Arcane Tattoos ancestry feat. Choose a school of magic. Abjuration, Conjuration, Enchantment, Evocation, Illusion, Necromancy, or Transmutation. You receive the cantrip that is listed in the feat, in parentheses, under the school you chose, as an innate arcane spell at will. For example, if you chose Evocation, you will receive the Electric Arc cantrip. This feat is really good. Yeah, it's a specific cantrip, but at least you have some choice in the matter. It's very good. Definitely consider this feat at first level. Courteous Comeback gives you a free action with the trigger. You critically fail a diplomacy check. However, there is a requirement. You must be in a settlement or a city, and you cannot have used this feat in that particular settlement or city within the past month. Reroll the diplomacy check using the second result. That's it. This feat can be really good, but you have to be careful about when you use it, since once you use it, unless you go to a different city, it's gone for a month. Next is Devil's Advocate. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus on perception checks against devils and on saving throws against their abilities. Also, if you run into a devil in a social situation, which will only apply to certain types of devils, you can make an immediate diplomacy check to make an impression on it, instead of having to converse with it for 1 minute. You take a -5 penalty on this check. If you fail or critically fail, you can instead spend 1 minute conversing with the devil and make a new check after that time rather than taking your first result. Also, if you happen to have the Glad Hand skill feat, you don't take the penalty on your immediate diplomacy check. This feat isn't that good early game. You won't run into a whole lot of devils in the early game. This feat can be good late game when you are far more likely to run into devils. Now let's talk about Dragon Spits. This feat has the prerequisite of the Tien Dan ethnicity. This means you have to be this ethnicity to take this feat. At least rules as written anyway. Yeah, it's not an access thing like most of the feats in this book. This feat allows you to choose one of the cantrips listed in this feat. So Acid Splash, Ray of Frost, Electric Arc, or Produce Flame. You can cast this spell at will, and when you do, the energy emerges from your mouth. This feat is really good. It's a shame that you have to be a certain ethnicity to take this feat. If your GM is a nice guy and not running rules as written, he may let you take this feat anyway, so keep it in mind. Just having a cantrip that comes from your mouth is really cool as well. Gloomseer is another feat that requires you to be a certain ethnicity. Not just to gain access to it, but to actually take this feat, you must be the Nidalese ethnicity. This feat just gives you low light vision. That's it. Not much to this feat. If you want low light vision and you don't want to be a half orc or a half elf, consider this feat. Otherwise, take something else. Keep Up Appearances gives you a special reaction. Its trigger is anytime you are affected by an emotion effect. You can make a deception check and compare that result to all observing creatures' perception DCs. On a success, that creature believes you weren't affected by the emotion effect. Any creature tricked in this way cannot benefit from the emotion effect in any way, even if they have abilities that require the target to be affected by that emotion effect. For example, if you are up against a rogue with the Dread Striker feat, and you succeed on your deception check on this reaction, you are not flat-footed as a result of being frightened to that rogue. Lots of emotion effects out there, very good feats. Know Oneself gives you a once per day reaction. Its trigger is when you critically fail on a saving throw against an emotion effect. You regularly fail the triggering saving throw instead of critically failing. That's it. It's a once per day thing, so it isn't that good. Would not recommend taking this feat. Qua Bond gives you trained proficiency in the skill that is listed in the feat for your Qua, or another skill if you're already trained in that skill. You also gain the Assurance skill feat with that skill. I'm not going to go over all the skills you get for each Qua because you can just stop the video here and look at them yourself. Getting an extra skill and Assurance in that skill is great. Definitely consider this feat if your GM gives you access to it. Sauk Astrology can be used 3 times per day, but you must spend 10 minutes looking at the sky or a star chart just after your daily preparations, or you can't use this action for the day. This feat requires you to use one action. After using this feat, if your next action requires you to make 1 or more skill checks, roll a d8. If you get a 6, 7, or 8 on the d8, you gain a +2 circumstance bonus on the first check you make. If you get a 3, 4, or 5, you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to this check. If you roll a 2, you get zip, nada, nothing. If you roll a 1, you take a -1 penalty on that check. This feat is very good. You stand a much better chance of getting something good than the nothing or bad effects. Plus the bad effect isn't even that bad. It's just a -1. I would consider taking this feat at first level if your GM gives you access to it. The next feat in the Lost Omens character guide, I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Something Carver. Anyway, this feat requires you to be a spellcaster that can cast divine or primal spells. So a druid, cleric, or a sorcerer with one of the bloodlines that gives them these traditions. Add Summon Construct to your spell list. When you cast this spell, if you include part of a creature's body as part of the spell's material component, the summoned creature gains a +4 status bonus to perception checks to try and find that creature. This feat just gives you another spell you can cast. It's very good if you want to find a specific creature and have part of that creature's body. Next we have the Viking Shield Bearer feat. This feat gives you the shield block reaction, and you gain trained proficiency in either the longsword or the battle axe, your choice. If you don't already have the shield block reaction or trained proficiency in these weapons and you want them, consider this feat. Otherwise, take something else. Lastly, for first level Ancestry feats, we have the Witch Warden feat. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus on saving throws against curses and against spells cast by a witch or hag. If you get a success on these checks, you get a critical success instead. Situational feat depends on how many curses, witches, or hags you run into. Now let's talk about 5th level Ancestry feats. First we have the Adaptive Adept feat. You must have the Adaptive Cantrip feat and be able to cast 3rd level spells to take this feat. Choose a cantrip or a 1st level spell from the same tradition as the one you chose for Adaptive Cantrip. You add that spell to your list in the same way as you did for Adaptive Cantrip. If that spell is a 1st level spell, you do not gain access to the spell at higher levels. Getting a 1st level spell or cantrip from another tradition is really good. Yeah, even if you pick a 1st level spell, you still have to get rid of one of your spells at that level, but it's still really good to get spells from different traditions, since some spells are specific to certain spell lists. Next we have Clever Improviser. This feat gives you the Untrained Improvisation feat and allows you to use skill actions that you would normally have to be trained in the skill to use. Untrained Improvisation gives you your level as a proficiency bonus on all your untrained skills. So even if you're untrained in the skill, you can still get close to the bonus you would get if you were trained. This feat is amazing. If you don't have a lot of skills but want to be good at all skills, take this feat. Third we have the Sense Allies feat. This feat allows you to sense willing allies around you. Any of these allies that would normally be undetected from you are instead hidden from you. Also, reduce the check to find hidden allies within 60 feet of you to 5 instead of 11. This feat isn't that great. I have yet to find a situation where this feat would be useful, and I've been GMing Pathfinder 2 since the playtest. Now let's talk about the Darkseer feat. This feat requires the Gloomseer Ancestry feat, which I covered earlier in this video. You gain Dark Vision. Simple as that. This feat can be really good. You will run into caves constantly in this game, and having Dark Vision will help a lot with that. Ornate Tattoo requires the Arcane Tattoos Ancestry feat to take. Essentially, you pick a 1st level arcane spell of the same school as the spell you chose for Arcane Tattoos. You can cast that spell once per day as an innate arcane spell. Any feat that gives you innate spells is really good, especially if you get to pick which one it is. Lastly, for 5th level Ancestry feats, we have Wave Touched Paragon. This feat just gives you a swim speed of 15 feet. If you need to swim a lot, take this feat. Otherwise, probably take something else. Now we come to 9th level Human Ancestry feats. First we have Cooperative Soul. This feat requires the Cooperative Nature Ancestry feat, which I covered earlier in this video. If you are an expert or higher in the skill in which you are trying to aid another in, you get a success on any outcome of the roll except a critical success. This feat is really, really good if you use the aid action a lot. Getting at least a success to aid, no matter what, is just great. I have one word for the Incredible Improvisation Ancestry feat. Broken. This feat requires the Clever Improviser Ancestry feat. You can use this feat once per day as a free action whenever you attempt a skill check in which you are untrained. You gain a +4 bonus on that skill check. Being able to essentially become an expert in any skill in which you are untrained once per day. It's just, there's no other word for it. Broken. Consider this feat at 9th level, definitely. Multi-talented allows you to pick any second level multi-class dedication feat, even if you normally couldn't take one of these feats because you don't have enough archetype feats to take a second one. Note that this does have to be a multi-class archetype feat, so none of the regular archetype feats in the Advanced Player's Guide. It must be tied to a class of some sort. In addition, if you have the half-elf heritage, you do not need to meet the feat's ability score requirements. This feat would be so much better if you didn't have to wait until 9th level to take it. There is another feat that allows you to do this at 1st level. I will cover that feat later in this video. And now we come to Group Aid. After you use the Aid action to help an ally with a skill check, you can help another ally with the same check for the same purpose that round. You can do so as a free action instead of a reaction. Note that you cannot use this feat on skill actions that have the attack trait, such as disarming a foe or tripping them. The preparation you did to help the first ally must still apply to the other allies, and you only get to help each ally once. If you help other allies a lot, this feat is very good. Being able to help all your allies in the same round is fantastic. Next is Hardy Traveler. This feat gives you a +1 to your maximum and encumbered bulk limits. In addition, you gain a +10-foot circumstance bonus to your overland speed. This feat is really good. The bonus to speed you will pretty well have all the time, unless you have another type of speed that you use more, but most players won't. The bulk thing is just a bonus. It's not that much of a bonus, but hey, if you want to be able to carry a bit more, this feat helps with that. Dragon Prince requires the Dragon Spit Ancestry feats. You can cast the Dragon Breath Sorcerer Bloodline spell once per day as an innate arcane spell, but you can only use the energy type that matches the type you chose for Dragon Spit. At 12th level and every 3 levels after that, the spell is heightened to the next spell level. Having a Dragon Breath weapon, even if you aren't a Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, is just great. Especially if you can get a cone instead of a line. A cone will normally hit a lot more enemies than a line. Plus it gets heightened? That's fantastic. Next is Heir of the Salk. This feat requires the Salk Astrology feat to take. When you use Salk Astrology, you roll a d4 instead of a d8. On a roll of 1, you take a -1 penalty to the skill check. However, on any other roll, you get the number you roll as a bonus on that skill check. So 2 is +2, 3 is +3, and 4 is +4. This feat is just a better version of Salk Astrology, and Salk Astrology was already pretty good. If your GM gives you access to Salk Astrology, consider this feat too. Shori Aeromancer is another feat that requires a certain ethnicity, but this one gives you a choice of 3 different ones. You can cast the base version of Fly on yourself as an innate arcane spell once per day. That's it. This feat is really good. Being able to fly without even needing to be a spellcaster is broken. Yeah, it's only once per day, but that's still really good. Definitely consider this feat at 9th level. Finally, for 9th level Ancestry feats for the human, we have Virtue Forged Tattoos. This feat requires the Ornate Tattoos Ancestry feat covered earlier in this video. This feat works just like Ornate Tattoos, except that you get a 3rd level spell. Also, you may choose a lower level spell heightened to 3rd level if you want. Any feat that gives you innate spells will always be good. But this is the first Ancestry feat I've seen that gives you a 3rd level innate spell. Very good feats. Now we can move on to 13th level feats, starting with Unconventional Expertise. This feat is similar to a lot of feats I have covered in other Ancestry album videos. Whenever your class gains expert or greater proficiency in any weapon, you also gain that proficiency in the weapon you chose for unconventional weaponry. These types of feats will always be good. Granted, this one isn't as good as the others because those give you this benefit with a bunch of different weapons, while this one only gives you this benefit with one weapon. But it can be any weapon from any ancestry, so it's still pretty good. Next we have Advanced General Training. This feat just gives you a level 7 or lower general feat. That's it. You still must meet the feat's prerequisites. You can take this feat multiple times and choose a different feat each time. Just a better version of general training. It's pretty good. Bounce Back gives you a free action with the trigger, you lose the dying condition. You can use this free action once per day. When you use this feat, you don't increase your wounded value when you recover from the dying condition. In other words, most of the time you don't gain the wounded condition when you use this feat after becoming conscious. I will cover the wounded condition when I get to my conditions video. This feat is really good. Not becoming wounded when you lose the dying condition once per day is fantastic. It basically gives you a free, I can gain the dying condition again without losing anything. Definitely consider this feat at 13th level. Fourth, we have the Stubborn Persistence feat. Whenever you gain the Fatigued condition, you can roll a DC 17 flat check. That's a straight roll without any bonuses. If you succeed, you aren't fatigued. If the fatigue has an underlying cause that you don't address, such as a lack of rest, you must attempt this check again at a time the GM determines until you either address the root cause or fail the check. The fatigue condition really doesn't come up very often in this game, so this feat isn't great. Now let's cover a feat, the first part of which I cannot pronounce. Something Ice Witch. In order to take this feat, you need to have a certain ethnicity and the winter-touched human heritage. Your resistance to cold increases to 5 plus half your level, and you can cast a 5th level Wall of Ice as an innate arcane spell once per day. The first part of this feat is pretty situational. Depends on how many cold effects you run into. The second part of this feat is very good. Like I said before, any feat that gives you an innate spell is fantastic. If you are a winter-touched human, consider this feat. Sixth, we have the Shadow Pact feat. This is another feat that requires a certain ethnicity. You can take 1 damage to cast 5th level Creation as an innate divine spell. You can use this ability as much as you want, but you can only have 1 object created from this spell in existence at any one time. If this object encounters bright light, it vanishes without a trace. This feat is very good. Having the ability to create objects at any time is fantastic, and the 1 damage isn't very much at all for that ability. Besides, you're not going to spam this because of its limitations. Consider this feat if you are the ethnicity that this feat requires, or if your GM allows you to take it. Lastly, for 13th level human ancestry feats, we have the Shori Aerialist feat. This feat requires the same prerequisites as Shori Aeromancer, plus that feat, or the ability to cast Fly. This feat just gives you a +2 circumstance bonus on acrobatics checks to maneuver when you are flying, and a +5 foot status bonus to your speed when you are flying using magic. If you fly a lot, consider this feat, otherwise take something else. The last ancestry feat for humans specifically is the 17th level ancestry feat, Heroic Presence. You can use this feat once per day for 1 action. You grant up to 10 willing creatures the effects of the base version of the Zealous Conviction spell, although the spell immediately ends on a creature if you order that creature to do something that they find repugnant. This action has the auditory or visual trait depending on how you inspire your allies. This feat is very good. Giving all allies temporary hit points and a bonus on will saves is just great. Consider this feat if you make it all the way to 17th level. Now let's move on to half-elf ancestry feats. Like I said before, in order to take any of these feats, you must have the half-elf heritage. You can also take these feats if you are a half-elf of a different ancestry other than human. For first level ancestry feats, I will start with Elf of Autism. If you're going to take this feat, you must do so at first level, and you are stuck with your choice, as you cannot retrain into or out of this feat. This is the half-elf feat I was talking about earlier. This feat allows you to pick an elven heritage and gain the benefits of that heritage. If you take this feat with the ancient elf heritage, which I will cover in another video this week, then you can take a multi-class archetype dedication feat at first level. With this feat, you essentially get two heritages, the half-elf heritage and any one elf heritage. This can be really good. Next, for first level half-elf feats, I will cover the Earned Glory feat. This feat gives you trained proficiency in performance, or another skill if you're already trained in performance. It also gives you the impressive performance skill feat in addition to your other skill feats. When you attempt a performance check to make an impression on an elf, if you get a critical failure, you instead only get a regular failure. This feat gives you an extra skill and a skill feat to go with it, which is fantastic. It's also a great roleplay feat, as there are a lot of elves in the world, and that last part applies to all of them. Third is Round Ears. This is another feat that you can only take at first level, and you are stuck with your choice as to whether to take it or not. You gain trained proficiency in the Deception skill, or another skill if you're already trained in it. You gain a +4 circumstance bonus on deception checks to pretend you aren't a half-elf. Observers are never granted bonuses on perception checks due to you impersonating a full-blooded human, and you never take penalties on these checks. If you don't want people to know you're a half-elf for some reason, then take this feat. Otherwise, take something else. Lastly, for first level half-elf ancestry feats, I will cover the Sociable feat. You become trained in diplomacy. Like all other skills from feats, if you are already trained in diplomacy, you get a different skill instead. You also gain the Hobnobber skill feat. As I have said, getting a skill and a skill feat to go with it is great. Now let's talk about 5th level ancestry feats for the half-elf, starting with Inspire Imitation. Whenever you critically succeed on a skill check, you automatically qualify to use the aid action to help someone else without spending an action to prepare to help them. If you want to help other people with their skill checks, this is the feat for you. Otherwise, take something else. Lastly, for 5th level ancestry feats for the half-elf is the Supernatural Charm feat. This feat just gives you first level charm as an innate spell once per day. Charm isn't really that great of a spell, but this feat is still pretty good if you want someone to like you. Really more of a roleplay feat than anything else. The last feat for half-elves is the 9th level feat, Pinch Time. This feat gives you haste as a 3rd level innate arcane spell once per day, but you can only target yourself. Come on, you should know by now what I think of these feats. Haste is a very good spell. Unfortunately, you can only target yourself, but that's okay. Now let's talk about half-orc feats. Again, you have to have the half-orc heritage to take these feats. I will cover the orc feats when I get to my orc ancestry album video. First is Monstrous Peacekeeper. This feat gives you a +1 bonus on diplomacy checks against non-humanoid intelligence creatures and against humanoid creatures that are marginalized in human society. GM's discretion, but it might include orcs, giants, and kobolds. You also gain this bonus on perception checks to sense motive on such creatures. Situational feat depends on how often you run into these sorts of creatures. Next is Orc Sight. You must have low light vision to take this feat. In addition, this is another feat you must take at first level if you're going to take it, and you are stuck with your choice. you gain dark vision. Simple as that. This feat can be really good. Most of the time, dark vision is going to apply much more than low light. You will probably be going into caves a lot more than other types of dungeons, and those tend to be dark places. Overlooked Mastermind is a great roleplay feat. Oh, you think I'm dumb just because I'm a half-orc? Sure, I'll play along. You become trained in deception, or another skill if you're already trained in it. You gain a +2 bonus on deception checks to lie when specifically feigning ignorance, and to deception DCs when trying to detect such lies. The last feat for half-orcs is the Tusks feat. This is another feat that you must take at first level if you are going to take it at all, and you are stuck with your choice. You gain a Jaws unarmed attack that deals 1d6 piercing damage. If you want to be able to bite people as a half-orc, take this feat. Otherwise, take something else. And that is going to wrap up this video. This week I will also be coming out with my Lost Omens character guide videos for the ancestries I missed earlier. That's the dwarf, the elf, the gnome, and the goblin. If this video helped you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you are already subscribed, don't forget to hit that sub-notification bell below this video to be alerted of new videos. If you have any questions, leave a comment below or let me know in the Pathfinder Lair Facebook group, link in the description. Next week, I will be continuing my Ancestry album series with the Catfolk Ancestry from the Advanced Player's Guide. So until next time, let's play some Pathfinder. 1, 2, 3.